What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and I want you to imagine your typical sitcom where the protagonist is having his boss over for dinner because he's trying to get a promotion and he really wants to make a good impression. The problem is nothing is going right for our protagonist. His quirky in-laws just showed up out of the blue, so he really quick had to shove them into the other room and hide them. The place was a mess, so he piled up all the garbage in the closet and just barely squeezed the door shut. Not to mention his nutty sidekick just made a mess over in the kitchen, and oh my God, there's a knock at the door. My boss is here. Everything is going wrong. What's going to happen? Well, that's China in the lead up to the Winter Olympics in February. And one of those I can explain situations that's going on in the other room is the total collapse of the housing market and the threat of the contagion spreading to the Chinese banking system. And recently, Evergrande's offshore creditors threatened to sue the company, which, good luck with that, you're not going to get your money back. And Evergrande is now asking for more time and urging those offshore creditors not to engage in any destructive legal action, which is Chinese doublespeak for, please don't sue us and cause a global banking crisis right before the world press shows up for the Winter Olympics. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Gamble, and I'm Nobody Special. And in one of the more hilarious headlines today, I saw Evergrande is warning its offshore creditors not to engage in any destructive legal action, as if the offshore creditors are sitting here. They've already lost 95 cents on the dollar. They know they're probably going to get nothing back. And the offshore creditors are saying, what do you mean destructive? What are you going to do? You've already stolen all our money. Are you going to eat us now? But what's really going on here is those offshore creditors, they're not going to get anything back. They know they're not going to get anything back. And China is really just trying to buy time because they know the Olympics is right around the corners and they don't want to light the whole global economy on fire right before the global press shows up. Now, before we get into the headlines, folks, I have to ask, could you please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell? It really helps me out, helps me to keep this channel growing, and I would be forever in your debt. And now it is that wonderful time when we shrink my big, fat melon of a head. And look at this story. Evergrande asks international creditors for more time and warns that legal action could be destructive. And Evergrande calling anything destructive is truly hilarious because this is where money goes to die. And this is in CNN Business. Evergrande is still trying to appease growing anger among its offshore creditors who have threatened to take legal action over the embattled Chinese developers' plans to restructure the business. The company is now asking international bondholders to give it more time to work on a restructuring plan, according to a filing with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange this week. Which, by the way, who are they kidding? This company knows they have no intention of ever paying their international creditors. Evergrande's international creditors know that the company has no intention of ever paying them. They know there's not enough money left to pay all the money they owe, and they know that the Chinese government has already taken over the company and that they're going to bail out the Chinese citizens first, and there's not going to be anything left for the international creditors. Everybody knows this, okay? The thing is, it's going to trigger a banking crisis when these lawsuits start piling up. Because right now, all of these banks and all these financial institutions have this toxic hot garbage on their balance sheets, and the second they sue in Chinese court, and the Chinese court says, no, you can't have the money, all of these banks need to make their books right, and that's when one by one the dominoes start falling and this becomes a global financial crisis instead of just a real estate crisis. China knows this and they don't want the embarrassment of that happening right before the Olympics on February 4th. When they're asking for more time, it's not like they're saying if you wait a few months we'll pay you. They know they're not going to pay. They're just trying to spare themselves the embarrassment. Given the size of Evergrande, the number of its stakeholders, and the complexity of the situation, the company will need more time to fully consider, evaluate, and assess comprehensively the number of potential solutions before it can responsibly further engage in substantial negotiations with offshore creditors. In a separate statement on Monday, Evergrande asked its offshore creditors to exhibit patience by refraining from taking aggressive legal actions. Such measures, it added, could result in a destructive outcome. And again, these people have already lost all their money. What is a destructive outcome anyway? Destructive for mainland China maybe, because it would be hugely embarrassing if this banking crisis that is inevitable were to start before the Winter Olympics, and then all the press will be in China asking inconvenient questions. And China's Communist Party does not like answering inconvenient questions from the press. They have no practice in it because they have a brutal stranglehold on their own press. Now, this week is the second time Evergrande has tried to placate concerns among overseas creditors who last Thursday said they had to seriously consider enforcement actions because the company failed to engage substantially with them about reorganizing operations. Now, what's really going on here is Evergrande does not have enough assets or enough money to pay all these debts. Everybody knows it, and what's happening is the government has taken over the company. 6 of the 9 members of Evergrande's Risk Management Committee are Chinese government officials, aka Communist Party members. And what's happening is Chinese state-owned companies are going to pick at the carcass of this dead, bloated blob that is Evergrande. Anything that's worth anything is going to go to these state-owned enterprises at a price that will probably result in just enough cash to repay maybe some of those wealth management products, and hopefully these state-owned enterprises can finish construction on all of these apartments that were promised to Chinese citizens. Again, the Chinese Communist Party has one concern, and that is social order, and they can't afford millions of people angry that their apartments aren't getting built or their wealth management products got stolen from them. So the priority is the Chinese citizens. They do not care one bit about international creditors. They will get nothing. Everybody knows this. Everybody is pretending it's not true because they know it's going to trigger a financial crisis when the dust finally settles. China definitely doesn't want that to happen before the Olympics. And I just want to point you to this article in Time. China faces a host of problems and the Olympics haven't even started. In summer 2008, the Beijing Olympics marked a big moment in China's progress toward global power. With the spotlight came controversy. Activists used the event to highlight the government's human rights abuses, but the event's triumphalist pageantry illustrated the story of China's rise toward prosperity and prestige before a world audience. Since then, China's ambitions have taken another leap forward. Under President Xi Jinping's leadership over the past decade, China's gone from pushing for reform of the international system to helping guide that reform to making plans for leading it. In recent years, Xi has heralded a new era that will move China closer to center stage in global politics. He's presented China as a new option for other countries, an alternative to Western democracy, and he's outlined what he calls the Chinese solution for the world's problems. Closer to home, Chinese leaders mean for their country to tighten control of Hong Kong, to pressure Taiwan to stop resisting Beijing's push for unification with the mainland, and to build military strength in the South China Sea. Yet the reality is that China's rise was losing trajectory even before a more aggressive U.S. foreign and trade policy and before the unfortunate health situation. While Xi's China dream of prosperity has become a reality for hundreds of millions of people, extending these gains to a population with rising expectations for a brighter future won't be easy, and China is still a middle-income country. To reach Western levels of prosperity, it needs 6 to 7% growth for another generation at least. The goal now looks nearly impossible to achieve because the growth engines that have powered China forward in recent decades are running out of steam. Now, this goes on to talk about the declining birth rates and the population collapse that China is facing, and we've talked about that on this channel. But then it moves on to talk about China's debt problem. In particular, it has relied heavily for economic growth on easy credit for property and other speculative investments. Too often, the institutional borrowers who have accepted much of this money expect government help and protection if they struggle to repay. Xi knows China's domestic tranquility and its national security depend on financial stability. To avoid a banking crisis and an economic crash, China's government has tried to clean up the business of borrowing and lending, but the various fights in recent months over the fate of a possibly too big to fail company like the deeply indebted property developer Evergrande make reform much easier to promise than to deliver. So long story short, Evergrande knows they can't pay their international creditors. China knows they can't pay their international creditors. The international creditors know they can't pay the international creditors. Everybody knows. Everybody's pretending that's not the case for some reason, maybe in some vain attempt to recover a few pennies on the dollar on the part of the creditors. And from China's standpoint, it's all about appearing to be all good here just in time for the Olympics, because they know they're going to crash the global banking system, and they don't want that to happen while all the world's cameras are pointed at them. That would be hugely embarrassing for a country that is banking on making this big, wild show about China's rise to dominance in the global stage by rolling out the red carpet and putting out the good silverware and fancy china and showing off in front of the world. They don't want any of these unfortunate stories to show their face during the Olympics. And a mountain of lawsuits from these international creditors triggering a global banking crisis would be hugely embarrassing for the Chinese Communist Party. Guys, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. I'd be forever in your debt. And until next time, live small and dream big.